discuss in advance that regardless of the outcome, you both commit to having a good time sexually. You're both willing to be there for each other and be willing to be creative to make this about the two of you enjoying an intimate experience together. Welcome to the Get Your Marriage On podcast. I'm your host, Dan Purcell, a Christian marriage and intimacy expert and coach. I'm on a mission to help couples have the best sex and most emotionally intimate marriages possible. Our episodes cover topics you've always wondered about and are packed with practical advice designed to help you take your marriage to the next level. I have to say, wow. I've invited my listeners and readers to submit your anonymous questions to me, and I've been blown away by the response. You have all asked some great questions, so this episode will be another session answering some of those questions that you have asked. Each day, the questions accumulate, and I don't think I'll ever be able to answer all of them on this podcast or my email newsletter, though I will do my best to be consistent on all those platforms. However, I would recommend that if you really desire to get your marriage and sex questions answered and get some help moving that needle in your relationship, that you give my Next Level coaching program a try. In Next Level, which is a coaching program, we work with you. So not only are your questions answered, but we're there with you every step of the way to help you build a more intimate and joyful marriage. And also, as you participate, you also get the support and help from others that are on the same journey as you. And as you find answers to your own questions, you can watch and listen to others being coached as well. I'm a big believer in marriage coaching, by the way, if you can't tell. It helps you get unstuck. Through coaching, you get more awareness of your thoughts and mindsets. It helps you find more balance in your relationship so that you can take courageous action when needed. Coaching can kickstart more desire and playful eroticism in your intimate marriage as well. If you would like to experience coaching to see how it works, I'm offering a free coaching session on September 1st. Just click the show notes below and you'll see the link to sign up. And there are also a couple other things that you might be interested in. On August 16, I'll be hosting a workshop all about navigating differences in sexual desire. This is probably the most common issue couples have in their sexual relationship. So we'll be diving deep into how and why sexual differences happen and solutions for couples to overcome those differences and create greater connection and intimacy in their relationship. You can register for that on getyourmarriageon.com, then click on workshops. Second, I don't know if you've heard, but we recently published a new digital product called The Ultimate Guide to Pleasing Your Husband, which is a companion to our previously published Ultimate Guide to Pleasing Your Wife. You can check that out and more on getyourmarriageon.com. You click on resources and then guides for better sex. You might see our other wonderful guides that we have there and see what's available for you. And third, as you make plans for the fall, why not schedule a weekend away for just the two of you? Better yet, why not make your getaway even more meaningful by attending our marriage retreat coming up in October in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area? More details are on our website, getyourmarriageon.com. These retreats are in-depth and designed to challenge you as a couple while balancing it with fun and romance. Okay, now on to answering your questions. First question. My wife is never able to climax. When we started dating, she said it was just something she has never been able to do. When I asked her more about how I might be able to help or do more, she gets angry and defensive and shuts the conversation down, often stating, I don't want to feel like I am a science experiment. How can I get her to open up more about what feels good, especially when we are in the moment, and have it be seen as a more positive conversation rather than a science experiment? First principle I want to teach is this concept of separation of tasks. Whose responsibility is it in the sexual experience for your wife to have an orgasm? Is it your responsibility or is it hers? If you said it's hers, that's the correct answer. It's up to her to have an orgasm, not you. Now, there's a lot of things you can do to prepare the fertile ground so that the seed will grow, so to speak, but it really is her responsibility. From what you described in your question, it seems to me that she's not interested in doing the work to learn how to get there right now for herself. Now, your wife is saying she feels like a science experiment with the way you're approaching the situation, and I would lean into that. Maybe there's some truth there. My assumption is that your ego or sense of how good you are as a lover is somehow connected to whether or not she is having an orgasm. And that is actually interfering with her ability to relax and enjoy pleasure because she feels judged or evaluated because she really isn't free to enjoy herself in the moment. She can't surrender to the pleasure. She isn't given the option of whether or not she can have an orgasm or not without a consequence to the way her husband feels about the sexual encounter. You can and should express your desires. I want to be clear on that. You can ask her. You can request that she tries to extend herself sexually. You can express her hope that she does what she can to feel pleasure in your sexual encounters because you care about her. We always want the people we love to feel happy and sexually satisfied. And then a, hey, I'm here if you need me attitude could go a long way. Expressing these things is your responsibility or your tasks. But demanding that she change or demanding that she tries harder is antithetical to the goal of what you really want. That's where your boundary ends. It's really up to her to decide whether or not she wants to take that step. Feeling free and a sense of sexual agency for one to follow her own pleasure in sex is critical to experiencing orgasm. And I know this is hard medicine. It might be hard to hear, but forcing the orgasm issue isn't going to improve your relationship with her because it doesn't honor her agency in the matter. If she's not interested in developing her sexuality or learning how to orgasm, pushing the matter isn't going to make it any better. The next question is also about orgasm. It says, it takes me a very long time to climax. For me, it starts with the mind. I have to be stimulated first and then remain connected. If my mind drifts off, then I have to start all over again. In the meantime, my husband has climaxed twice. Many times, it has never happened at all for me. I will get almost there, and then once my husband climaxes, the feeling isn't the same. I end the night being sexually frustrated. Now I find myself avoiding intimacy because of that feeling of not being fulfilled. I've tried pleasing myself after he, rolls over and goes to sleep, but that's not the same as sharing that precious moment with my husband. First of all, I have a lot of compassion for people like yourself that try really hard to climax and just can't get there often. I understand how frustrating it can be, and I realize that it feels like progress is slow and feelings of inadequacy or like it's not fair that your husband comes twice while you're still trying to get there, and aroused enough for orgasm. And then, of course, after he ejaculates and he's done, it kind of ruins the moment for you because he's finished with it. And he's just looking forward to sleeping next. I wonder if it'd be helpful if we discuss some basic principles around how to have an orgasm. Sometimes the goal of wanting to have an orgasm actually interferes and gets in the way of having an orgasm. Perhaps you've had the experience of where you've tried to will yourself to fall asleep, and the harder you try to force yourself to sleep, the harder it actually is to actually fall asleep. The quicker you can get rid of the goal of having an orgasm in, X amount of time, the more likely you will reach orgasm. One way to think about this is consider your mindset and expectations around climaxing. How much time do you realistically need to climax? 30 minutes? An hour? Whatever it takes, I promise it's worth it. The second thing to realize is that generally speaking, the more you learn to climax, the better and easier it gets the next time. The third thing is that there could be a few practical things that you could do to help move things along for yourself. Everyone has two thresholds. We have an arousal threshold and an orgasm threshold. Your physiological arousal threshold, in this case, as in you get vaginal lubrication, you get wet, your nipples become sensitive, your vulva expands, and so on. That all begins when you've had enough stimulation to get things aroused and started. This can happen through your thoughts, touch, and so on. Then, as the stimulation continues to build, it builds until you hit your higher orgasm threshold, and that's when you climax. Some people just have a higher orgasm threshold than others. Some people have a lower orgasm threshold. I don't exactly know why, but mental conditioning, genetics, age, relationship matters, all those could actually influence where your orgasm threshold is. And some medications can actually make it harder to climax too, essentially raising the orgasm threshold even higher, requiring more stimulation to get there. Another thing that puts downward pressure on the arousal, making it hard for you to reach your orgasm threshold, are anxious thoughts you might be having during sex, such as, am I going to come this time? Is my husband going to come before me? Is he bored yet? Why is this taking so long? And all those kinds of thoughts. Those things put downward pressure on your arousal, making it harder to climax. So, learning how to relax and enjoy the stimulation and accompanying pleasure rather than being fixated on an outcome can really help. There are other things you can do to help you reach your orgasm threshold faster if you're open to it. I recommend getting a good vibrator that works for your body. Generally speaking, clitorises respond really well to certain types of vibration that are really hard to replicate with a penis, hand, or mouth. Engaging sexually when you aren't absolutely exhausted or distracted can help you cross that orgasm threshold too. Getting enough rest, exercise, and eating well all play a factor into your general sexual health also. Let's not forget foreplay throughout the day. Sexting, flirting, and genuinely appreciating each other are all parts of building a great sexual relationship and aid in helping you in building that stimulation that you need to cross your orgasm threshold. I think many of you can relate to this next question. My husband and I have been married for 18 months. For our whole marriage, he has always been self-conscious about ejaculating quicker than he would like. I want him to feel more confident and for us to be able to try more sex positions that require a more delayed ejaculation. Any advice? So, premature ejaculation is probably the number one complaint I hear from men about their sexual performance. And I've done in-depth workshops on overcoming premature ejaculation. And these workshops are available within my couples coaching program, Next Level, as well as on the getyourmarriageon.com website. Generally, there are physical reasons for premature ejaculation and psychological reasons for premature ejaculation, or PE for short. On the physical side, it could be that the nerves are just too sensitive. He could do something to reduce the sensitivity, such as wearing a thick condom. There are products such as Promescent that are like a delay spray that numb the nerve endings on the tip of the penis so that the sensation of stimulation isn't as strong. One of the side effects of some antidepressants in the SSRI category make it more difficult to men to reach orgasm. So, some doctors take advantage of this known side effect and prescribe a short-acting antidepressant for men to treat premature ejaculation. And a few men I know say this works like a charm and they're really happy with the result. In the United States, at least, I'm not aware of any over-the-counter medications for PE, so you'll need to see your healthcare provider about this particular option. You can engage in sex positions, such as the one with the woman on top, aka cowgirl, or spooning with the man from behind, where there's less penis stimulation and she can take more active role in her arousal and stimulation. That can help with premature ejaculation. Some research indicates genetics might play a role in premature ejaculation in men, although more research is needed. It's difficult for men to talk to their dads about their PE struggles, as one might talk about family history of heart disease or cancer, because, sex is such a taboo topic, and who wants to talk to their parents about their premature ejaculation issues? There's also the psychological side of premature ejaculation. Freaking out that you might come too soon actually makes your body come too soon. Performance pressure makes you come too fast. Some men in marriages where sex is infrequent and he feels starved for sex often struggle with PE because their body is overly worried about his wife's experience that I can't mess this up, that it overperforms, sort of ruining the experience for both in the process. The problem just compounds. If it's psychological, one recommendation is to move away from the intercourse discourse. Sex doesn't always have to be intercourse. What about oral stimulation? What about manual stimulation? Or breast or anal stimulation? What about toys? There are so many creative ways you can enjoy deep connection and pleasure that doesn't have to rely on a penis in a vagina performing in a certain way. If you do want to try intercourse and work through feelings of self-consciousness about ejaculating quicker than you'd like, here are a few ways to think about it. First, discuss in advance that regardless of the outcome, you both commit to having a good time sexually. You're both willing to be there for each other and be willing to be creative to make this about the two of you enjoying an intimate experience together and not about his penis's performance. Tip number 2, go really slow. Take deep breaths. And for the man, see if you can gently squeeze your pelvic floor muscles to maintain some control in the process. Number 3, talk a lot as you make love to each other. Explain what you're feeling, what kind of arousal you're experiencing. You might want to engage in eye gazing and gently touching other parts of your bodies too during the experience. This takes the attention away from performance, makes it really more about just the two of you enjoying this unique and fun, intimate experience together. The principle here is to make a penis's performance not the definition of what is happening sexually. For more information on this, you can check out my website, do a search for premature ejaculation. You're going to find tons of resources there. If you'd like coaching on it, especially if it's like a psychological issue, check out Next Level. We have a lot of resources in there that can help you, and I can personally help you through those things too. Here's the next question. My husband and I are newlywed and still very new with the whole sex thing. Although we haven't done nothing before we got married, it's still very new and a growing process. I think we're getting better and learning more about each other, definitely. But I have two questions. One, for the wife, I haven't been able to reach climax with penetration, only hand or oral. It feels as if I cannot be stimulated through penetration. Is that normal? Is there something I or we can do differently to try? Number two, my husband is on antidepressants. He started taking them a few weeks before our wedding. On our honeymoon, before our first try ever, he told me he was taking them and that the doctor said he might struggle to reach climax. And that has been the case. And sometimes it takes so long it actually starts to hurt. But I do not want to make him feel any more bad about it than he already feels. And I'm really not experienced enough to know what new or exciting things to try. Wow, this has been scary and relieving to type this. First of all, congratulations on your wedding and kudos for having the courage to ask these difficult questions. It's amazing how much community, such as this one, can help you elevate your sexual relationship. I hope you get the courage to ask more sex questions as you have more of them, because unless you're having the courage to ask, you probably won't gain the wisdom you desire to overcome your sexual challenges. Now, for the first part of your question, yes, it is true that most women don't orgasm from penetration alone. Some studies suggest about 30% of women do. And that leaves 70% of women needing something more stimulating in order to reach orgasm. One study suggests anatomy, or AKA your genetics, plays a role in whether or not you can orgasm from penetration alone. In our Western culture, in our media, such as movies or porn, we often depict women having an orgasm from penetration alone and somehow put it on a pedestal, like that is the superior and better way to have sex. And if you can't orgasm that way, then you're not as good. I don't buy into that idea because that's not the majority of most women's experience. I personally thought that something was wrong with my wife, or maybe my penis, because she didn't climax through intercourse until I learned 13 years into my marriage that I had the wrong model in my head all along. You see, most women need direct clitoral stimulation because the clitoris is her sexual center, not her vagina. So, oral sex, manual stimulation, sex toys, and so on help women reach climax far more reliably than intercourse alone. This isn't to say that you may never experience orgasm through penetration. I don't know how long your sex sessions take, but one couple I talked to was surprised to learn that women need at least 25 to 30 minutes of stimulation for her to have an orgasm. Because this couple, their sex sessions were usually 10 to 15 minutes long, and that was it. So you might increase your odds by spending more time getting aroused and just adding more time to your sexual experiences, aka more arousal. So then you might have a better chance of having orgasm through intercourse. For more information on how to have orgasms through intercourse, or if you're not having orgasms through intercourse but wish things were a little better in that area, check out episode number 75 titled Amazing Intercourse with my guest Ruth Buzis. Now to the second part of your question. Yes, as we discussed earlier, medications do impact a man's ability to climax, especially those short-term SSRI or those SSRI antidepressants. He can talk to his doctor to see if there's alternative medications he can try. He can also not make sex so performance-oriented around his ability to climax. You can try different things for him, different types of stimulation, or also just approach the sexual experience as, hey, this is a time for both of us just to enjoy intimacy together, regardless of the outcome. That takes a lot more maturity, perhaps, but it is a great way to experience time together like that. Okay, this is the last question we'll address in today's podcast episode. This person writes, why does it feel like being higher desire for sex is such a bad thing? The lower desire spouse feels put upon by requests, and then we, the higher desire spouse, are told we need to back off or put more effort into the marriage or do more work. Abstinence is less work for the lower desire and is still their reward, and we feel like the bad guy for it. I appreciate this question because I think so many of you listeners can relate. Being the one with higher desire for sex in a marriage isn't necessarily a great position to be in. The reality is, in just about every marriage, one of you is going to have more desire for sex than the other. The person with lower desire will control the amount of sex or possibly even the kind of sexual activities that go on in the marriage. And this dynamic doesn't just happen with sex. The lower desire partner in any situation holds more control. Think about it. Lower desire for having children, lower desire for moving houses, for a specific kind of food, for a type of vacation, and so forth. The lower desire person has more control in the relationship. But the sexual realm does have more vulnerability to it because it's so intertwined with the relationship dynamic. It's especially dysregulating for the higher desire spouse when the lower desire spouse decides just to call off sex entirely in the marriage. Because the lower desire spouse has all the control and decides to shut off sex unilaterally, it feels really unfair to the higher desire spouse. They're handed a situation wherein they didn't necessarily want or choose. It's really easy to fall into victim thinking, which reinforces the idea that you are without choice and power in the situation. But remember, you always have a choice. You can choose how you'll respond in the face of the difficulties of life. Exploring all your options, even if your options aren't your first choices, will give you clarity on what to do and get you out of the trap of victim thinking. I do have a few thoughts that I hope are helpful for you. The first is to pay attention to the narrative or story you're telling yourself in your situation. For instance, in what you wrote, you mentioned that you feel like being the bad guy asking for sex because your spouse doesn't want it. When you say you need to back off or put more effort into the marriage or do more work, it sounds like the frame you're operating out of is that sex is some sort of a reward or something you earn from your spouse. As long as you keep putting sex in the frame of something that you earn or are rewarded with, you'll always feel victimized and in turn resentful. So let me suggest another way to look at it, in that the sexual connection that you desire is a pathway to deeper emotional connection, or that your sexual desires for your spouse are equally legitimate, wholesome, and good, and that it's there to draw you both together closer, more intimately. Sex is not just a reward, but it's part of any good, thriving marriage. Having lots of desire for sexual connection is a great thing and can be your superpower and can be the gift that you contribute to the marriage. Another way to look at this is that having desire for sex can shape and grow you to be a better person. Your spouse may have a different frame of thinking about it, but you can still choose which frame you want to adopt and operate out of. Another thing I want to mention is that sometimes our spouses are lower desire in part because we're anxious about sex. I did an in-depth episode titled Why Higher Desire Spouses Are Anxious for Sex. It's episode number 84 in our archives if you want to go back and listen to that one. Highly recommend it. Sometimes our spouses are lower desire for sex too because the sex we're offering isn't great to begin with. The meanings involved in the sexual encounter aren't ones he or she wants to have, or it's not pleasurable for him or her, or it takes a lot of effort for him or her. Your spouse could be lower desire for sex precisely because you set up the scenario in your marriage such that if they were to consent to having sex with you on your terms, he or she has lost and you won, so to speak. Sometimes those with higher desire for sex feel entitled to sex, and that entitled attitude is super unsexy because it makes participating in sex with you feel like an obligation or a duty. Or sex has become all about your ego, or you use sex from your spouse as a way of reassurance that you're okay, so you depend on sex to feel good about yourself. If that's the case, then sometimes the lower desire spouse is withholding participation in the kind of sex for a really good reason. Last of all, this is where I believe marriage coaching can be super helpful for you. It's situations like these where talking to someone trusted and experienced will help you see your options and help you make better decisions clearly. A coach can point out any blind spots that you might have. If the sex you're offering isn't great, the coach can help you with the skills to bring better meaning frames to the marriage and make the experience better for both of you. A coach can help you break cycles that keep you stuck so you can actually progress and thrive in your relationship. As always, thanks for listening to this podcast. If you'd like to submit an anonymous question or check out the Next Level Coaching Program, you can find them both at getyourmarriageon.com. I feel so privileged to work in this space with you, especially as I work and coach with those couples in Next Level. I love seeing couples take the effort to create more intimate and connected relationships, and you all inspire me to keep taking my own marriage to the next level. As you create more goodness in yourself and your relationship, it's inevitable that you'll also inject more goodness into the lives around you, like a rising tide to lift all boats that will bless generations to follow. So thank you again for being part of this community and this movement, and I look forward to hearing from you and seeing some of you in Next Level.